We've been talking about the 8 awakenings of great beings. This is Dogen's take on the teaching by the Buddha. And we are to number 4. He says the 4th awakening is diligent effort. It is to engage ceaselessly in wholesome practices. That is why it is called diligent effort. It is refinement without mixing in other activities. You keep going forward without turning back. The Buddha said, "Monks, if you make diligent effort, nothing is too difficult. That's why you should do so. It is like a thread of water piercing through a rock by constantly dripping. If your mind continues to slacken, it is like taking a break from hitting stones before they spark. You can't get fire that way. What I am speaking of is diligent effort." This one to me, and of course we could say that about all 8, but I'm going to say it about this one in particular. To really understand this is to understand something that is at the heart of this tradition in particular. And to misunderstand this one is to miss a lot. A lot rides on how we read this. Dogen says that diligent effort is to engage ceaselessly in wholesome practices. I'm not going to tell you what wholesome practices are. 1, because that conversation is huge, but 2, because you know. You know what wholesome practices are. You know when you're engaged in them, and you know when you're not. The image here that for me is so critical, and I want to focus on this one because this is the one that will take us, I think, to the center, is this one about water. Dogen says, it is like a thread of water piercing through a rock by constantly dripping. What is the water's agenda there? There is not one. And I raise this, and I want to raise this as clearly as possible, because if we misread this, we misread what practice is. We imagine that it's cumulative. When he says it's taking one step in front of the other and not turning back, the misunderstanding is if we imagine that there's a goal out there, and that these steps are a means to some destination. They're not. A step is complete. We take a step forward because that's the way we're facing. Our destination is where our foot lands. The rest is a fantasy. When water drops, its only agenda is to land. And so it lands. Each drop of water is complete. It's not part of a stream that's trying to bore through rock. It's not trying to achieve something more than just this. And the rock, too, is diligent effort. Because the rock's only agenda is to stay there. To hold still in the face of it. to allow itself to be changed by the world. Some of you have heard me complain in the past about this, what for me is I don't know, it pushes my buttons. That it's common in Buddhist books, and in particular Zen books, that authors will often sneak in some reference to how many hours they have sat in Zazen. You know, they'll tell a story and they'll say, well, and this takes me up to 1986, and by this time I had sat, 20,000 hours. But that communicates a gross misunderstanding of what this is. It isn't about 1 hour or 2 hours or 20,000 hours or 100,000 hours. These aren't little gold coins that we collect along the way. Bling, bling, bling. There's just this one. If you want to measure your practice, and please don't, but if you want to quantify it, if you're desperate to quantify it, instead of thinking, how many hours have I sat in this way? Ask yourself, how many times have I come back? In the last 30 minutes when we were sitting here, how many times did you drift away and then come back and say, I'm doing this? I'm landing here. And then outside of Zazen, how many times have you come back? When you walk down the street and you're fantasizing about, what if I won the lottery, or what if I had done something different 20 years ago? And we start imagining that other reality, the different job and different status, maybe a different family, and then we come back. We land here. We say, I'm here. This is where my feet are. How many times have you done that? Because that's what this practice is. It's returning and returning and returning to here, to nowhere else. Zen practice, as I understand it, and as I hear Dogen describing it here, is the practice of never, ever, ever giving up on this, and simultaneously completely giving up on that. And so we commit ourselves to what we're doing now. And it can be so small. It doesn't have to be heroic. It doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be part of a puzzle that eventually becomes awakening, or Buddhahood, or enlightenment, or whatever it is that we think we want over there. He just says we have to ceaselessly engage in wholesome activities. Wholesome activities, for the most part, they're not that exciting. Often they're a small act of giving. Sometimes they're a small act of restraint. But they're a choice. A choice to commit to this. So that whatever this is, whatever this step is, whatever this gesture is, or this word, that is delivered as a wholesome act. No one will notice. And at the end of your days, at the end of your path, whatever this path looked like, no one will know. There won't be a gold star. And that's why we talk about this as an awakening of an adult. When you're walking down the street and you see your neighbor's garbage can blow over, you put it upright and you keep walking. Because it's there. Not because you want praise, not because you want to be paid. Not because it all adds up to something. Adults see what is right in front of them and they take care of it. There's no music. There's no applause. There's just this ceaseless engagement in wholesome activity. And then they take the next step. And the next. So you can take this language as motivational language. It reads as motivational language. Right? But again, as you digest it, be sure that you understand what you're being told not to give up on. It's what you're doing right now. And the rest, you can let that go. I'll stop there.